It is the Tuesday before Christmas and all through the house. Well, we're in the house.
Yes, we're in the house.
We're in the house.
Are we creatures?
And we're stirring.
we are the creatures are stirring.
We are stirring because there's a lot going on, and we can't be two places at once.
Right.
So we're here now. We've taped a little earlier today because as we speak, we're at the Marriott Center.
That's right.
Getting ready for the Lindenwood BYU basketball game on BYU TV, which is at 9 Eastern, 7 Mountain Time tonight. So that's kind of how we've tried to be two places at once many times.
We can't do it, and we figured out that this was the best alternative. And the nice part is you hopefully you're joining us at 6 o'clock, and we're going to take you right into telling you to head over to BYU TV and watch us do the basketball game with the WCC Ohio Valley Conference matchup here.
So it's kind of a glorified countdown.
Right.
And that's how we're rolling tonight. So we welcome you here on this Tuesday before Christmas to the Wise Guys, Dave McCann and Blaine Fowler, and let's just jump right into it. Big 12 schedule release. We're going to discuss why we're not going to see it till February.
Yeah, which is we'll get more into it.
We've got some interesting ideas.
We were told it was going to be out December 1st.
And then the 15th.
And then the 15th. And then, now it's not. So there's some interesting happenings behind the scenes. We'll talk about that. Should I stay or should I go? That's the big question. I thought we would have an answer to this question this morning. Who are we talking about? We're talking about Jaron Hall and his decision, BYU's quarterback, on whether to stay, come back and play one more year at BYU, or to move on to the National Football League. And I honestly thought we'd have a decision by yesterday.
Yeah.
But obviously he's not certain and is looking at some more things. And so.
And maybe we'll get it
I think we'll
before our show's done.
I think we'll get something this week, hopefully.
So that's something we're watching pretty closely, and we'll watch it through our broadcast today. The late strategy change that led BYU to a win at the New Mexico Bowl over SMU. We'll talk about that.
Yep, how it came about, and we'll review that game a little bit. Some of the really good things that happened and some momentum that they're taking on. How about stuff in the Utes? That's always something good to talk about, right? the magnitude of Mark Pope's triumph and his basketball team over this Utah team that was in the net top 20 coming into that game, 9-2, and having come off a win against number 4 Arizona. So we'll talk about that a little bit as we move on as well.
Let's go with our headlines. And the headline for this week, and again, it can change here at any moment, but the Jaron Hall decision whether to go into the draft or return for his final year of eligibility. He hasn't been on the football field since getting hurt against Stanford. That was before, 2 days after Thanksgiving. Didn't play in the bowl game, was on the sideline with a boot. We knew he wasn't going to play the whole time. But the staff played coy with it a little bit to keep SMU off balance. However, he was always in a boot and on a cart. There was no mystery to this once they showed up down there in Albuquerque. But the question is, why hasn't he decided one way or the other? And then let's talk about the ramifications of the delay. Why hasn't he decided?
I think there's a lot of data that he's been trying to gather from different sources, including NFL scouts, and he's trying to get a really good sense of where he will land in the draft. And I think, I put it this way. If somebody had said to him, well, you're a certain second-round draft pick, we wouldn't even be having this conversation right now.
Right.
If he was going to be drafted in the second round, or maybe even if he knew for certain at worst he was going to be a third rounder, he would have announced already. We would have heard about it yesterday morning. And but I think he's getting some different information to find out, okay, well, where am I? Is it the third? Are you confident? Why is one person telling me this and another person's telling me that? Because I think as you get further and further up there, as you get into that 4th and 5th and 6th round, or you start talking free agent, and I'm not positive where he is at this point, because I don't know how to weigh the fact that he didn't just play in the bowl game and now everybody knows he was hurt again.
Yeah.
Right? And everybody's aware that they love his toughness, that he played through an injury midseason, through about 4 games with a shoulder injury. But he hasn't had a healthy campaign his entire career at BYU. How does that weigh in? Because from a skill set perspective, there's no question he has an NFL skill set. He's got the arm that can make every throw. He's a phenomenal decision maker. He's a great leader. He's, from a character perspective, he's the guy you want on your team. So the only question mark is, how early do we draft him? Because the earlier the draft, the more upfront money we have to invest in him.
Right.
Based on how confident we are that we think he can stay healthy in this league. And so I think if I'm a person in the league, those are the questions. Had Jaren Hall stayed 100% healthy all season long, didn't have that little lull in the middle because of that shoulder injury, never had the foot in the boot, ankle injury with the foot in the boot, and basically just did what he did, I think there wouldn't even be any question, and we'd all know he'd be going out.
And BYU would have been in the top 20, and his highlights would have been on TV a whole lot more.
If he's healthy during that 4-game losing streak, I'm convinced BYU wins at least 2 of those games.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's a whole different deal, right? So it's a different season, but it wasn't, right? And so I think that he needs some more data points, and that's why he hasn't. And maybe he'll get those today, maybe he'll get those tomorrow. I think he just needs to talk to a few more people to feel comfortable about where he is and how secure he is. And it's very different than the olden days, like 3 years ago, where with NIL money and all those things, you actually have some money you're leaving on the table by going, right?
Yeah, this is where the upside of NIL, we've been talking about the downside, and there's plenty of it by coaches poaching other players from other teams over money that they don't have to have their hands on because someone else is promising to pay it. But this is the upside to it of, hey, it might be in your best interest to stay in school. Now, he's going to graduate. I think he just graduated in December. I think he's graduating this month. And so it's not about staying and getting your degree, but it's about staying in school and getting more prepared for a job. And here's where the NIL is like, hey, look, it's not just you're out, good luck. It's, hey, now think about this. We can help you stay in school. And that's the upside that I think made it. If there's no NIL money, there's
no discussion.
You got a young family, you need to go get a job.
Right. And there's, so my oldest, Kellen, was done with school before his senior season. And he was a borderline NFL guy. He would have been a free agent had he not decided to go to law school. And we talked to Andy Reid and some other folks about it. And people remember that Kellen was a 2-year, part of 3-year starter at BYU at free safety. And he tells me the most fun he had was his senior season because he was already done with school. And so he knew he was either going to go play or he was going to go to law school, right? So in the fall, he only had to be registered for one class. It wasn't like he had to have this worry about eligibility or all of that. And he actually, for his senior season, just got to play football and have fun and not worry about school. He loved it. And there was no NIL money back in those days. So there's something to be said if you've got an NIL deal and your prospects in the NFL aren't going to get worse, right? So if he has a chance to improve his prospects, be a higher draft pick, this is a heavy quarterback class this year coming out, and he can make some money, and he's already done with school, so he can just enjoy it and just continue to work out and get better. There's a lot of upside to that. There is a big downside, and that is you could get hurt again.
Yeah.
Right? You could get hurt again. That's the down.
I wrote an article in the Deseret News this week on that. It's decision time, one way or the other, because if he drags this out and then goes, the suitors that have come to BYU or that are calling to say, hey, I'd kind of like to play out there, do they lose those guys? And so they lose Hall and those guys. Drew Pine from Notre Dame, who had been here, was all over social media, committed to Arizona State yesterday. So there's one that's gone.
Right.
That had deep interest in BYU. Keaton Slovis, Pittsburgh, USC quarterback. If you've been on Twitter or whatever, you know he was here a couple weeks ago, scoping things out at practice with his parents. If you bring your parents, it's like introducing your date to your parents.
That's right.
It's not just like, I'll just go out. This is serious.
It's more serious when your folks show up.
So here's 2 questions for you. Number one, if Jaren Hall is in the portal and is showing interest in BYU, is there a better quarterback in the portal than Jaren Hall?
No.
So even though we get tempted with wanting the next thing, something shiny and new or whatever, the best thing for BYU would be to retain Hall.
Oh, absolutely.
But sometimes people get feeling like, you know what, he should go. Let's move on because I'm kind of excited about this, the mystery of the unknown, because we know what Jaron is, and quite frankly, this was a tough season for him. And when healthy, he's awesome, and when unhealthy, he was 0-4 and sat out a bowl game. So I think there's kind of that, and you can get that vibe.
There's not
on social media.
Absolutely not a better player in the portal than Jaron Hall is. That's a great point, Dave, because I've had some say, well, is it better for BYU for him to stay or to go? And I look at him and I think, are you seriously asking me that question?
Yeah.
Like he is a top 3 round draft pick when healthy, right? And nobody in the portal has proven any better than that, right?
Because they're in the portal.
And then here's the other thing about it. He has been in this system. He knows exactly how to run this system. He's established himself as a leader. His teammates love him. He knows how to win. He's played against high level competition. Yeah, for BYU it'd be great, but to BYU's credit, like when I think about the guys that deal with Jaron directly, it would be Aaron Roderick and it would be Kalani. They're unbelievably supportive of helping him get all of the information that he needs to make a good decision. And they will support him if he says, listen, now that I've weighed everything, I feel like I need to go, and this is why. They're going to rally around him and go, let's help you get ready for that next level. That's why other quarterbacks will want to come and play for BYU. Because of the way that BYU handles that. And
where BYU got in trouble this year was when Hall got hurt. There was such a difference between Hall and the guys that were waiting, the redshirt, Conover, Finnegan, Soljay Mayava Peters, that they determined it was better to play an injured quarterback than the healthy backup.
Right.
That can never happen again. You can't have someone so far off going into the Big 12 because your quarterback is going to get hurt.
Yes, likely going to.
And then all of a sudden you can't play someone on a regular basis that can't throw.
Yeah, your young guys have to work out, and there has to be enough space in between them that they don't get itchy and go, oh, well, I'm only one. Because if you have a guy 1 year behind Jaron Hall 2 years ago, in today's world, he's gone. You just talked about Pine from Notre Dame. Pine started and won a bunch of games for Notre Dame last year because their starter was hurt. And when he went and met with folks, I'm assuming this is why he's in the portal, they probably said, hey, he didn't lose his job while he was injured, and you were phenomenal, and you're going to be the guy down the road. And he probably looked and went, wait a minute, there's not enough years in between.
Yeah. I don't think I'm going to be that guy.
There's not enough years between he and I, and if he's your guy, then I need to go be somebody else's guy. Now, if your quarterback is a junior and you're a freshman and you're really, really talented and you get that freshman ready to play, or a sophomore and a senior, and then you can say to them, hey, you're going to have your chance. And guess what? If you play 2 years here and you're good, that's a pathway to the NFL. Be patient. It's hard to have the perfect staggering of quarterbacks that they don't get anxious, because what happens is exactly what's happened in Notre Dame. So you know what Notre Dame has to do? They need to go out and find a really high-level FCS or junior college guy or a big-time incoming freshman to back up their other guy now, because they were very fortunate, and Notre Dame had a solid season. Not, Notre Dame standards are crazy like BYU's, right?
Yeah.
With the schedule they play. But they were solid because they had Pine as a backup. Imagine but now he's gone. So now they got to go figure that out. It's a new world of college football.
So BYU's going to bring in a JC guy. We know that. They've got to, if Hall comes back, then they've got to use next season to fill the gap, because they can always get a senior in the portal.
And they have a really good freshman coming in that's coming next in 2 weeks too.
Yeah, and so they've got to have somebody in between, because you can't just go from fifth-year senior to freshman
not to win
against
a bunch
Texas.
Of games. Right,
yeah,
right.
So that would be that. Or if Hall leaves, then you either get a stopgap guy for 1 year, or you get maybe somebody who's a junior in the portal where you can get two,
right?
Which I think is ideal if they're decent.
And I think Pine has 3.
Yeah, he's got 3.
No, so
I think that's what was attractive about him.
I think that Pine, that was the most attractive thing about him, was that that if Jaron goes out, you bring him in. You're like, this guy just started a bunch of games as a freshman last year. He still has 3 years left to play. And so he's the solution for the next 3 years, right? And now we can bring our young guys along just great. But you know what you do? You take the best available guy in the portal. And so if he decides to leave and there's a 1-year guy left, you go, okay, well then here's the plan. The 1-year guy, we got to get him ready to play in this system right now. He's a proven entity. We get him ready to go. And this new incoming freshman we got, now we've got a year to get him really ready to go. Maybe bring a JC guy in to compete. But I feel like you have to have 3 guys competing for that job that can all play.
Yeah.
BYU got really, really spoiled with Romney as the backup.
Right.
Because he could have started a lot of places, and he was patient enough to stay at BYU, even though he was only a year behind Jaron, right? In fact, he and Jaron were the same year, if I remember.
Yeah, and it just worked out because he was closing in on his degree.
Yeah.
I think his wife was in school, and it was like, you know what? And he wanted to play with Gunner.
Yeah,
and it just worked out. And then Tate was coming.
Yeah, and let me tell you, this is that situation that BYU had the last 2 years is a rarity in college football. Yeah. To have somebody as good as Baylor Romney as your backup quarterback, it's, I remember talking to the coaches, and we're like, well, Jaron's out. What's going to happen? They go, nothing. We run the exact same offense. Baylor can run the exact same offense. We're not going to change anything because he can execute this thing as good as anybody in the country can execute an offense. We have no worries. And more importantly, you would talk to the teammates, and they would go, yeah, we have no problems. Right. We got Baylor coming in.
Yeah.
That's not normal in college football anymore because those guys aren't patient, and they leave. A Baylor Romney would have gone 2 years ago in today's college football world. Well, maybe Baylor wouldn't have because he's a special kind of a kid, right? People should, when we look back and look at that, people should be really grateful because he won some big games for BYU over the last several years. Really grateful for his mentality and his commitment to team and his, and I wouldn't have blamed him to go.
Right.
Someplace.
Wanted to play.
I would support him. A heck of a great kid.
And this is where parents can get in the way, voices outside get in the way, and pretty soon you can convince a player, I'm not getting enough passes. I'm not getting enough plays. I'm the best ever. I deserve better, and I'm not going to wait. And then you realize, it probably should have. Maybe you could have been all those things, but you're not it right now.
Yeah.
And if you stay and work,
you could be it.
Things develop.
Right. Especially a young player, right?
Yeah.
And patience still can be a virtue for these young players that are coming in. This mentality, I should be targeted a bunch as a freshman or a sophomore. You really, at a Big 12 level, which BYU is now, if you have 2 great seasons, junior and senior season, at your position in your NFL dimensions, that's all you need to be an NFL player.
Right.
And if that pathway is there, and you can be a contributor as a youngin, and then be the focal point the last couple of years of your career, really all it takes is a phenomenal senior season to do it. And you see too many guys just go, well, I need it right now, and a little myopic, where they're like, wait, the guys that are a little bit older, they're not necessarily more talented than me, but they have more experience, so there's a reason for them to be on the field. And eventually I'm going to be in that role, and I'm going to be the guy. That's kind of lost at times now. That
notion that the grass is always greener has always it's always been relevant because everyone always believes it is greener on the other side of the fence. In NIL, we can use that same analogy. The NIL necessarily isn't greener because none of it's guaranteed. You're all going by handshakes and deals, and so you chase somebody promising you something that is too good to be true, which is another notion, which is always proven. If it sounds too good to be true, it is.
Probably is, right?
and so you see kids jumping in the dark, expecting to grab this handful of money just sitting there, and then come to find out that it isn't there. And now you've jumped, and you know what? If you jump back, you got to sit out a year.
Right.
This is your free year, and they jump. And I think sometimes they jump into the water, and they go, I don't know how deep that is. But it seems like it's deep, so I'm jumping. And then you find out that it's not.
Yeah,
and
it's knee deep.
It's knee deep, and you die, and you dove,
you break your ankle
or your nose. But I think that's the world we're in, and we've seen some other Cougar. The Barrington brothers have gone into the portal. Mm-hmm. They're going to go. One's already going to Baylor, and I imagine the other one's going to follow suit.
Why would the other one not go with his brother?
Right.
Why would that not be a package deal?
And how would that scenario on that offensive line be better than the same offensive line in the same league, but for BYU? If it's not an NIL thing and maybe you got more money, maybe you like the coach better, this or that. The freedom is you can go do it. That's the rule.
And you can do it.
But it's a head scratcher.
Yeah, and it depends on what your ultimate goal is too. Like if you might be miserable and just need a different venue, and I'm completely okay with that, right? But if the ultimate goal is, hey, I'm a great player and I want to get to the National Football League. We're in the league that BYU is playing in starting this fall. The pathway is there just as well as it is with any other team in that league, right?
Yeah.
If you're good, you're going to have eyeballs on you. And if you have the skill set, and it's always been that. It wouldn't matter if you're at Weber State. If you have the talent, the pathway may be a little bit longer, but you can get there, right? But now where BYU is in the Big 12, competing with those, you're playing against NFL talent every single game. If you're good, your pathway is just as easy to the NFL at BYU as it is at TCU or Baylor or Kansas State or any other team in that league, right?
Yeah.
So that's not a reason to go anymore. Well, I want to go where I can get more exposure to NFL folks because I think it's better for my NFL career. That reason's lost.
Even in basketball, Damian Lillard proved that. You could go to Weber State and you can make $1 bazillion in the NBA.
Well, and BYU, even though they've been in independence, some of the best players in the National Football League are from BYU right now. It certainly didn't stop Fred Warner from being one of, if not the best, linebacker in the National Football League right now.
Yeah.
Kyle Van Noy was on a heck of a run for a while. Tyler Algier right now is performing as one of the top running backs in the National Football League.
Zach Wilson
left BYU last year.
Zach Wilson today announced he's going to start again on Thursday.
Yep. Number two pick. And if they'll be patient with him, he actually has a good chance to be.
Come on, Jets.
A chance to be good. But it's never been at BYU, even when they were in the Mountain West Conference or in the old WAC, has not been a deterrent to your ability to play in the NFL. And now with the Big 12, this notion that, well, I want to get the exposure, I want to be playing against the best, well, that's going to be happening every single solitary Saturday. So why do you leave? You would leave either you're miserable with your coach or you're getting money. And I hate the fact that that's part of the deal now, but that's really the couple of reasons.
Because it used to be no one cared if you didn't like your coach, you signed to play there, and the money was illegal.
Well, and I should say
now the money's legal, and you can do what you want.
We're only referring to players that are highly talented, and so I'm talking about guys that if you're at BYU and you know you have a role, you're going to be a starter and a featured guy, and you transfer. Which, by the way, there's not very many of those. No. Right?
Not many stars are transferring.
No. There's a lot of guys transferring that people keep going, whoa, another one. And I'm going, guys, here's the difference between now and just even 2 or 3 years ago. This might be a little more turnover this year as BYU goes into the Big 12. First of all, they're shedding some weight from COVID years, right, where you had more players, allowed to have more players, and they're kind of working through that still. Every year, this is the time of year when coaches sit down with players and say and talk to the players about the reality of what their role is going to be moving forward. This is where you're at right now. This is where I see you right now. And every year, players go, well, I don't like that I'm not in the top 3 linebackers right now. Why am I not in the top 3? Well, because we have 3 guys that started 7 games coming back next year, right?
Yeah.
Well, I don't like that. Maybe it's time for me to be in the portal. Well, we think you have a great future with us. We think you're going to be a guy. You're a young guy. But starting in spring ball, the 3 guys that start a bunch of games are going to be in front of you, and it's your job to displace them, and we're going to give you every opportunity. Some guys go, no, I'm going to go someplace where they're telling me I'm going to be the guy. And they transfer, right? That's one scenario. Another scenario is they sit down and the coach goes, hey, you've been here for 2 years now, and I'm sorry, I just don't see it. It's not working out. You've been passed by this guy and by this guy.
You got a bad attitude.
You're number 4, or you're obviously miserable here.
Yeah.
I haven't enjoyed the work ethic. Listen, I'm not telling you you've got to go, but I don't see a future for you here, and I think you may have opportunity someplace else. There's those transfers and those, but what used to happen 3 and 4 years ago, both of those scenarios used to just quietly go transfer, and we'd hear about it on the back end. They wouldn't go on Twitter and say, I'm entering the transfer portal for everybody to go, oh, there's another guy leaving.
Yeah.
We don't know what the scenario is. Believe me, there's a couple of those that BYU is like, man, we do not want these guys to leave. We're very disappointed that they're going to leave. There's a couple of those guys where they're like, man, we wish that guy would stay and battle for a job, but we're not going to make him promises that aren't real. They need to earn it. And then there's another handful that they've said, you just don't have a future here, but we care about you, so let us help you find someplace else to go. All 3 of those scenarios are represented in the announcements, I'm in the transfer portal. So be careful before you start counting people up and going, what in the world is going on?
So the Jaren Hall watch continues, and he could make his decision anytime today after our broadcast, and we'll keep you posted as we hear it. If he does come back to BYU, how many more wins is that next year in the Big 12?
So it's versus what? Versus we have
versus
versus we go with a veteran quarterback
like a Slovis. That's been
okay.
out there in the social media. Let's say Slovis.
So I say Keaton Slovis for Jaren. I think Jaren's worth 1 to 2 more wins, honestly, because of his familiarity with everything that they're doing, and you just hit the ground running and all that. He's probably, I would say maybe one if it's a really, really high level transfer, right?
Yeah.
If it's you got to bring a new young person in that's unproven, and you got a brand new guy, whether it's a JC guy or you're playing one of the young guy, a young guy that just signed, then it's probably 2 or 3 wins, right? So
it might be the difference between
1 to 3
6 wins,
yeah.
a 6-win season, and 8-win season.
Yeah, it is. And believe me, realistically, my goal for BYU in the first 2 years in the league is to get bowl eligible.
Yeah, get to 6.
People like, hey, the Barringtons are transferring to Baylor. Well, guess what? Baylor was 4-5 in the league this year. Baylor was 6-6 this year. They were great last year. They were 6-6 this year. Hey, guess what? TCU was miserable last year, and their college football playoff this year. When you're in the Big 12, you're going to vacillate back and forth, and every year you make a bowl game is a big deal.
One thing we do know, as studiers of Cougar Nation for the 33-plus years we've been doing this together, BYU fans are not prepared for a 6-win season. That is not acceptable. Not it's realistic, but realistic and what's acceptable are 2 very different things, because realistic 6 could be a really good year next year as the schedule, depending on how the schedule shakes out. Cougar fans watching 6 losses next year, out of their minds.
They might go crazy.
Out of their minds.
Everybody might go crazy.
But I think we lost some people in October, and then we had an injured quarterback, and we played Notre Dame, Arkansas, at Liberty, and East Carolina, and that was awful. We had a chance to win the 3 of the 4. Liberty just mopped us up right from the start.
Yeah.
But even with an injured quarterback, it doesn't sit well. We don't like to lose. No. And we're not built on losing.
And it's so interesting to me. Do you know how many people I've talked to in the last couple of days that have gone, man, I sure am glad we got that bowl game, because for some reason 8 just sounds so much better than 7. Like, the fact that they got 8 wins this season makes it so it's like I'm still not happy with it, everybody's saying.
I'm just disappointed.
But if we had only won 7, I don't know what I would have. I just couldn't wrap my head around it. I was like, wow, that one game made all the difference.
And one thing we said here on the show before the New Mexico Bowl is if BYU was 10-2, they would have still been in the New Mexico Bowl.
Yeah, that's the problem last year. Not next year.
That's life as an independent.
Not next year. Next year, 10-2, depending what happens around the country. You're like Kansas State is in a New Year's Six bowl, right?
Yeah.
And they're
against Alabama.
Yeah, and they're 10-2, right?
I think so.
Or do they have 3 losses?
They might have 3, but they'd won the Big 12 championship.
Right. But so it's like a whole different deal starting.
It's going to be a different deal. Puka Nacua still hasn't made his decision. That could come today. We believe he is heading out to try his hand at the NFL. I got mixed feelings about that one.
Kansas State's 10-3.
10-3.
And they're playing a 10-2 Alabama. So with 3 losses, Kansas State's in the New Year's Six Bowl. That's pretty cool.
That's pretty cool. And they had to fight, scratch and claw to get there, and they did. Puka Nacua. Puka Nacua is more easily replaceable than Jaron Hall because of the depth in the receiver room.
And because you don't have one guy that plays that position. You've got a bunch, and they all have to be good.
So he, too, why hasn't he made his thing? It's like, if you're going to do it, do it.
Yeah.
And you know what? I guess there's no, forced timetable, but it's just if you're moving, move. Announce your move.
And the thing, both of those guys have had a really good experience. Like, when you talk to Puka, just go watch Puka. Go back and watch any game that Puka was in and see the smile on his face. And we've had a chance to go out and watch some practices. He's just smiling every day in practice. Puka didn't have a great experience at Washington. No. He had a phenomenal experience at BYU these last couple of years. And so I just wonder if, in his mind, he's just like, it's not a sure thing at the next level for anybody unless you're a first or second round draft pick. Puka's not going to be a first or second round draft pick.
No.
So I wonder if in his mind he's like, man, I've loved this. Do I really want to give this up? Is there NIL money out there that's guaranteed to me?
Is there a way for me to stay?
Is there a way for me to stay
and stay in school and all that stuff?
I think they're going back and forth.
I'd love for him to come back.
Oh, he'd be phenomenal.
Yeah.
You'd get both of those guys back.
But if you had to pick one of the two, you'd pick Jaron Hall.
Because the whole offense is centered on the quarterback, right? Yeah. And BYU's really deep at wide receiver. And you think about Chase Roberts and Cody Epps and Keanu Hill, and they're really, really good. Puka's next level, but at any given route, you got 4 or 5 guys out there on a route, and everybody has to contribute. And BYU's really deep and really talented. One of their most talented positions on the field is at wide receiver, and so you could do better if it was just if you were only picking one guy to go. BYU would survive better or fare better if they had Jaron back in there running this offense.
One thing we have seen is that the portal's active, and BYU's going to lose guys, and they're going to get guys. And the week began with the word from UNLV's running back, who's in the portal, that he's committed to BYU, and that is Aiden Robbins. He's 6'3", 230 pounds, ran 209 times last season for 1,011 yards, 9 touchdowns. He has 2 years of eligibility, which I think is the light comes on a little bit, like
really
2
nice,
years of that. Caught 25 passes for 125 yards and a touchdown. And then I saw an interesting thing. Well, okay, what did you do against decent defenses? Yeah. Fresno State has a decent defense.
It was a very good team this year.
Who'd they hammer in their bowl game? Washington State?
Yeah, Fresno State was the best team in the Mountain West. Boise State and Fresno State were the 2 best teams in the league.
And San Diego State has always had a good run defense.
Defensively, San Diego State's never going to be
so
bad.
Combined against those two.
Yeah, Fresno State beat Washington State 29-6 in their bowl.
Yeah, dominated them. Robbins against San Diego State and Fresno State combined for 47 rushes for 259 yards and a touchdown. Now, he's not running behind BYU's offensive line. He's running behind UNLV's offensive line. I've seen some video. You've seen some video. It's out there on YouTube. It looks like he's legit.
Yeah, he's a big, strong, 230 pounds, 6'2", fast, physical guy. And so, we'll see in this scheme, does he fit well? But all indications are that he's going to be a really nice addition.
And he wasn't a guy that was sharing carries like Chris Brooks.
Right.
Chris Brooks.
He's a 1,000-yard rusher.
He was the meat of UNLV's ground attack. But before UNLV, he was at Louisville for 2 years. Before he signed with Louisville, BYU recruited him heavily out of high school, and he decided to stay home, play for the Cardinals.
Yeah.
So
he didn't get a lot of.
Didn't get
a
much
lot
there.
of opportunity there. And his first opportunity to get on the field was at UNLV, and that's where the transfer thing is a good thing for kids, right?
Yeah. And the portal. Here's where the portal works for BYU.
Right.
And sometimes guys blossom later. Tyler Algier was playing linebacker when he was at BYU.
It's unbelievable, actually.
and look what he did. And I'm not saying he's Tyler Algier, but I'm saying that where he's coming from, he was a very important piece of UNLV's offense.
When you mentioned Tyler Algier, that goes all the way back to the original point we were making at the beginning of this, and that is, if you're patient, things can still work out, and that you don't have to be a 4-year starter to be a great player. Tyler Algier played linebacker for 2 years. and then moved to running back and played running back for 2 years. And he's a starting running back in the National Football League and is a monster right now. And everybody's talking about him.
Hey, next week on the Wise Guys, Danny Ainge, BYU Hall of Famer, Utah Jazz CEO. He's going to be live with us. And Tim Lacombe, former BYU assistant basketball coach and now broadcast analyst for the Jazz. That's next week. That'll be December 27th here on the Wise Guys. We'll wrap up the year with a bang, and we're excited to have Danny Ainge come on with us, which makes it a great month. We had Ty Detmer last week, Danny Ainge next week. So that's coming up next week. Big 12 schedule release date has been moved back to February 1. There's been some talk around the league that they were going to announce, because we're like going, what? What gives here? Something's afoot. Something is afoot. And there's a buzz going around in the inner circles of things that the Big 12 wanted to release the 2023 and 2024 schedules together.
Right.
Because it would be Texas and Oklahoma's last 2 years, and they'd do the home and homes.
Right.
Well, Oklahoma and Texas want to get out early.
And there's been...
So then you can't release the two schedules.
It didn't seem like there was an appetite for that from the Big 12. And the schools seemed like it's a hopeless uphill battle. We're just going to be in the league through 24. But in recent weeks, maybe the last month, there's been a lot of talk that the Big 12 may allow, with
some incentives,
certain arrangements and some incentives may allow them to go a year early so they'd play in the 2023 season.
Here's why I think they're going to do that.
And we're saying May, right?
Yeah. Here's my theory. There is no way under the sun that the SEC is going to allow the Big Ten a full year of being the granddaddy super conference of them all, because SC and UCLA join in 24.
Right.
Texas and Oklahoma can't get out until 25.
Right.
Now, do you think the SEC is going to let CBS and the Big Ten enjoy 12 months of we're better than everyone else?
The SEC prides themselves on being the leader.
Yeah.
Right? On leading out in all of this. And that's why I think they're trying to figure it out. And
I think that's why the SEC now is willing to give the earth, moon, and the stars and away games to Big 12 team, anything to make it attractive to get out.
Yeah, and I think Yormark played it right from the beginning, where he played hard. Like, no, they're under contract. They're staying, like, to have leverage at this point. We're like, we really want this to happen.
And they've got total leverage.
Well,
total leverage.
This is what's going to have to happen. And so the interesting question that you and I have been talking about a lot this last week is, if they leave early, will the Big 12 expand more quickly?
Right.
Because Yormark has also on multiple occasions been quoted as saying, yeah, we're absolutely open to that if it's the right thing for the league, and we certainly are looking west, is what he said.
And the Pacific time zone.
Right. We're looking at the Pacific time zone.
That doesn't include the Utes.
Right.
Pacific time zone is Washington, Oregon.
Right.
The Arizonas, depending on foreign daylight savings.
I think when he says Pacific time zone, he's probably most specifically talking Washington and Oregon, right?
Yeah.
And Oregon's a big, big franchise.
And now UCLA's Board of Regents have allowed them to leave.
People thought that might be an obstacle, and it wasn't the obstacle that they thought it was going to be.
No. Right? Money talks. So that's going to happen. I do believe that the Pac-12 now is more vulnerable than ever before in all these discussions.
Right. And, he hasn't minced words, the commissioner of the Big 12. And he said, yeah, we're open to that. And then there's a second question that comes with that. So do they expand, and who would those expansion teams be, right? And what does this do in terms of changing how quickly BYU gets a full share of conference revenue? Because remember, there was a phase-in part of it for BYU.
For 2 years.
Because Texas and Oklahoma were still in the league, right? So there were more mouths to feed, right? And you phase in as they leave, and then you get a full share.
Because the new TV deal doesn't kick in.
Right.
Until they're out.
Right. And they got more money per team with them out, by the way. So the new contract was not based on Texas and Oklahoma being in the league. So then the question is, does BYU get bigger money earlier in this process as a result of them?
See, I think that's interesting. We'll ask Brian Santiago, the deputy AD, who's going to come on with us next month before the schedule announcement. We'll ask him that question, because could it be that if a BYU has a year trimmed off of that period transition period, that they could pick up an additional $25 to $30 million if Oklahoma and Texas leave early.
Well,
because that's what all the schools are getting.
Here's the other thing. It's not just fewer mouths to feed. It's also, they're not letting them go without some type of
penalty,
cash penalties and payments and things like that. So there would be revenue coming in that perhaps, we don't know, perhaps BYU could share in.
So we're just speculating, but I think it's a legitimate speculation that the Cougars would get more if the two schools leave early. And so then you'd have to ask yourself, is that one game against Oklahoma at Provo worth $25 million? And that answer would be absolutely not.
Yes, you're exactly right.
So and I think Yormark's a genius here. Let's see how it plays out, because he could have his cake and eat it too. Everyone could get more money. Those teams are going to leave. I think it's hard to keep a team in the league. It's like a marriage. We're getting divorced in 2 years.
Right.
Because legally that's what the judge says. So let's just act like we're married for 2 more years. That's impossible. There's an end. And so it's like, well, if it's going to be in 2 years, why not make it now or after this coming season? And then you got to buy your way out. So that's something to watch. That could make BYU millions of dollars if Oklahoma and Texas leave early.
And interesting, I was looking at this the other night, the Big 12 standings. So when we think of the Big 12, we always feel like Oklahoma's right at the top of those, right? But this has been an interesting year.
Yeah.
As Texas and Oklahoma are on the way out, Texas finished overall 8-4 and 6-3 in the league. They finished third in the Big 12
with no guarantee they're going to win their bowl game.
Right, and then you've got Oklahoma, who finished 3-6 in conference, the same as Kansas, and 6-6 overall. Now, it's understandable because their head coach left and took half the team with him to USC, right? I know that's an exaggeration, obviously, but
took the best one. But he took the best player.
He took the best player for sure, and Oklahoma was reeling from that. It just goes to show you how important a quarterback is, right? And Oklahoma will be back; they'll be good, and Texas will be good too. But it's an interesting time where TCU won that league with 12-1 record, 9-0 in conference. And, of course, they lost in the championship game. Kansas State ends up 10-3 this year. Texas Tech had a good year and finished 7-5 this year. Oklahoma State is 7-5. And then you got Baylor at 6-6, Kansas at 6-6, Oklahoma at 6-6, West Virginia at 5-7, and Iowa State at 4-8 in that league. So that's the league for you. It's going to be a competitive league.
Yeah, it's going to be great.
It's going to be really tough with Oklahoma and Texas in it. But even with those guys gone, it's not like the two best teams in the league are leaving right now. And
even in Kalani's post-game news conference after winning the New Mexico Bowl, he was finally able to answer the question about the Big 12, and he's a big smile on his face going, yeah, we can't wait to start the Big 12. We're going to work now. It's all about the Big 12. He had asked his guys to not talk about it during the season. Don't take it away from the seniors who are having their last blast. But now that is over, and it's all about moving forward in BYU's P5 football program, and they're heading to the Big 12. By the way, the early signing day is tomorrow.
Right.
And full coverage on BYU Sports Nation at noon Eastern Time, 10 Mountain Time on BYU TV and BYU Radio, and maybe there'll be some portal additions there. We expect a couple of guys to be announcing soon that are going to be game changers for BYU on the defensive front.
Yeah, and BYU recognize they've got to get way bigger and way more physical up front to compete in the Big 12. As they evaluate, as Jay Hill and Kalani, those guys have been looking at, what do you got to do to play in the Big 12? Especially inside on defense, and they've got a couple of big commits that are on that D line that are going to come in. They've got an edge rusher we can't name names yet, but that you're going to hear about here in the next couple of days. That's going to transfer in.
And that's big. It's like, whoa, okay,
yeah, like really good one.
Jay Hill has come in at a good time, and he told us on game day last week, it's priority number one is to rebuild the front seven.
Yep.
Have to build the front seven on defense.
Yeah, and interesting, he looks, and I watched again during that bowl game, BYU's pretty solid in the secondary. They've got a lot of young guys. Like, hey, the defensive player of the game, it was Ben Bywater. He's a youngin. The defensive player of the game in the secondary, Jacob Robinson, he's a youngin.
Micah Harper's back there with him.
Micah Harper's a young. They have a lot of really good young players, and they have some depth in the back end. And you know what? They're in pretty good shape at linebacker. They're going to add a face or two there too, but they look pretty good at linebacker as well. The news of Keenan Peely being in the portal, I don't think he's announced he's going anywhere yet.
No, I haven't seen.
Remember that those can also be they can test things out and decide to stay. Although I think once you put your name in the portal, you send a message to your team that, hey, I'm looking to get out, and that's not necessarily a good message.
And there's no guarantee that when you come back and go, hey, went into the portal, took a look around, I'm going to stay here. It's like, well,
guess what?
You know what? We took a look around too.
We recruited over the top of you, right? So, but you got Max Tooley coming back, who's a phenomenal player. People forget about him because he sat out the end of the year injured. Yeah. But what a great start to the year. He was amazing in that Baylor game.
They just got to get deeper. They need two Max Tooleys.
Ben Bywater. Remember, they moved Fisher Jackson over.
Yeah.
Toward the end of the year, and he played. Jackson Kafusi played really well in that game. Kavika Gagne, who they were thrilled about as a freshman, was injured midseason. He'll be back for next year. Now the big question is, this is 2 years in a row where they've been devastated with injuries. I'm talking 4, 5, 6 injuries in that position group 2 years in a row. It came in as a position of strength 2 years in a row. It will come in as a position of strength again next year. Somehow they have got to figure out how to keep that group relatively healthy.
Yeah, and they're going with a whole new
or two, but not 4 or 5.
No, and they're going with a whole new strength and conditioning program with coaches there. We'll see how that plays out. In that New Mexico Bowl, BYU won 24-23 against SMU. Jacob Robinson had that game-saving tackle on the 2-point conversion attempt with 8 seconds left. I thought it was interesting that BYU had 23 guys out with injury from the season. 23 guys, and they somehow held SMU to 23 points, which I think was the second lowest offensive output for the Mustangs all season.
Yeah, and it was a great game plan, really, on both sides of the ball. This staff did a great job. Big adjustment on the offensive side. And on the defensive side, you need to look at BYU's. Everybody needs to take a look at BYU the last 4 games. And look, Kalani's kind of said, listen, we're gonna be more diverse with what we're doing on defense. And everybody that thinks we're just gonna put 11 people in line of scrimmage and blitz every play next year. I know Jay made a comment. I will put 11 people in line of scrimmage and blitz before I let somebody just pound the ball at us. He had that. He didn't say, yep, we're gonna blitz 11 people every play, because I promise you, Jay Hill's gonna have times when strategically you're dropping 8. Right?
Yep.
And Kalani's calling of the defense was a really, really strategic. There were times when they brought 5 and 6. We saw corner blitzes. We saw nickel blitzes off the slot on the short side of the field. We saw safety blitzes. Micah Harper involved blitzing from safety. Multiple linebacker blitzes.
We saw 5 tackles for loss and 2 sacks and a couple of deflected balls.
And we also saw some drop 8 at really critical times when it confused the quarterback and there was no place to throw the ball. Like Kalani, I felt like was really in a flow. But I honestly feel like this defense has been pretty solid for this 4-game win streak has been a really solid for the defense. And we give credit with all of the defense with Elisa and Ed and Preston and those guys all kind of having moved on.
And everyone else wondering what's going to happen to them.
And like what's going on. Kalani called on Gavin Fowler, Jan Jorgensen, Vince Faula, that whole group. To say, guys, you got to be the stability here. And, oh, by the way, Jay and Kelly are coming, but this is recruiting week. And so we got to get recruiting. So these guys are all going to be out on the road. Kalani is going to kind of say, hey, Gavin and Jan, this is what we need to do. Those guys ran practice for the last several weeks and prepped this team for the bowl game on defense. Kalani had a great rhythm with his play calling in that game. And the result is a team that averaged almost 40 points a game and nearly 500 yards of total offense was held in check. How about the fact that they held them to 10 points in the first half?
Yeah.
Phenomenal.
There was a strategy switch, and we give credit to Aaron Roderick. On Thursday night, BYU decided they've been preparing Cade Finnegan, and they've been preparing Soljay Maiava-Peters. Maiava's a runner. Finnegan's the passer. And as the week went on, they figured, you know what, our best chance to beat SMU is to keep Tanner Mordecai, their quarterback, off the field, run the football, run the clock. They can't tackle. They haven't tackled all season, so let's make them tackle us. And so Thursday night, they go to Sol J, and they said, you're going to start for us. And then at the game, he rushes 14 times for 96 yards and a touchdown. Struggles throwing the ball. They knew that. They threw a pick in the third quarter and didn't throw another pass the rest of the game. Cade Finnegan was sick. We were wondering, why aren't we seeing Finnegan?
Right.
They're both redshirt freshmen with no experience. So Finnegan wasn't gonna get in, but we didn't know that until later. And so Sol J gets the MVP for offense. BYU wins the game. As a team, they outrushed the Mustangs 209 to 171, and they won the time of possession battle by 3 minutes and 10 seconds. There were games this season where BYU lost time of possession by over 20 minutes?
Yeah.
A couple of games where they were over a quarter and then some change. The other team had the ball, and that didn't happen under all the circumstances you just described, and with a redshirt freshman quarterback that struggles to throw the ball beyond 10 yards, but he's tough to tackle, and they win that game.
Honestly, this is as good a bowl win as BYU's had in recent years based on the circumstances, right? Yeah. With all of the distractions, with basically your fourth string quarterback starting in the game. And hey, a lot of credit goes to the players for saying, okay, coaches, we believe in this game plan, and we're going to go out and execute it. And then the coaches saying, listen, this is how we're going to win this game. I mean, they knew what they had to do. They wanted to keep the scoring way down. They didn't want to get in a scoring match. They didn't have all of their offensive weapons. And they basically said to the defense, we'll possess the ball. So you're going to have a chance to rest. You got to get a couple of stops a half. But we're going to make it so there's way less possessions in this game. And it's like an old school game. It was, you always used to say, you go back 10 years, and we used to say, hey, if you can hold a team under 24 points, you should win a game. Well, we don't say that anymore. Now we say it's like you got to score more than 35 to win a game. BYU scored 24. They held their opponent under 24 by 1 point, and they win the game. And remember, the offense didn't even score 24 because Ben Bywater had a 76-yard interception return for a touchdown that added to that. If you would have said to me at the end of the season, before we knew any of this, hey, can BYU's offense score 17 points against SMU and win a game? I would say no. There's no way in the world. Not only will they not win, they'll lose by 21 or more. So this game plan to keep the ball away from them and to run it, and BYU's offensive line, let's give them credit too. And how about Houston Haymuli? He had some blocks in that game. Blocks. He was knocking people.
He should have played more during the season. That's clearly evident. But I was glad he was able to go out with a bang.
He was knocking people around. Isaac Rex had a really good game blocking too, and had a couple of catches. But what a great game plan! Somebody said to me the next day, "Man, I mean that was just 1 point win." I'm like, are you listening to yourself right now? First of all, BYU was an underdog in that game. They started their fourth. Like, I went through all of these things, and he went, I didn't know all of that was going on. How did they even win? And I'm going, exactly. That's exactly right. How did they even win?
Well, I'll tell you what, that the black unis with the blue helmet and the sailor logo, there was, mixed reaction on that one. People like old-fashioned stuff, but other people just thought it was the coolest thing ever, and it was cool. It was cool to see the sailor on the helmet and the black pirate flag on the back of it with honoring Mike Leach, a former BYU
really cool
grad, not former BYU grad, a BYU grad. Yeah. So while they were turning heads in football, basketball was over at the Marriott Center pulling off a stunner. Let's talk about hoops for a few moments in the time we have left for Wise Guys this week. By the way, you can follow us on YouTube. We got the link in the chat. Hit the subscribe button. It's free. Click on the bell. You'll get notifications whenever we post something new or go live. The more subscribers we get, the longer our wives will let us do this show, which we appreciate. Follow us on Twitch. Make your free account by clicking on the chat button in the lower right part of the screen. Sign up for free. Follow us. And then at ysguys.com, subscribe to get our weekly email with highlights from the show, and that's free. We researched it, and everyone's favorite price is free. And so that's what we've done.
Yep, absolutely.
That's all free.
We need you. And not only are our wives going to let us continue to do this if you guys all sign up, but Jack's not going to kick us out of his studio here.
No.
It's like
No, I think he's all
we
in.
got to get more setups, or eventually we're going to get kicked out.
And look, we've got all winter and spring and summer to talk about the Big 12.
That's right.
This is going to be the greatest offseason in the history of BYU football. And the Wise Guys, we want to be part of your regular rotation. BYU hoops now with 8 wins, 2 games this week. Lindenwood tonight, Weber State on Thursday, both at the Marriott Center. This is a unique team. We like the things coming along, but we just need more evidence that they've figured it out. They got 3 quality wins of the 8, Dayton, Creighton, and Utah. I'm not sure you'd pick those 3 if BYU was going to get 8 wins. I don't know if those 3 would be in there. Quality losses at San Diego State and then USC and Butler. Mm-hmm. Easy wins, Idaho State, Missouri State, Nichols, Westminster, and Western Oregon. And unexplainable losses, South Dakota and Utah Valley. So what do you make of this 8-5 group?
Yeah, the weird ones are the 2 unexplained. They just couldn't make a shot to save their lives. Like, it wasn't that Utah Valley and South Dakota played some unique defense that nobody else played, and BYU just couldn't get a shot off. It's like, why did this team show up in those 2 games and not be able to shoot at all?
Yeah,
it was, and so does that happen a couple more times this season? I don't know. I'll tell you, this last couple of games, they've looked much better, and I do believe that part of it is Rudy Williams. Mark Pope made the decision to put Rudy Williams on the bench. This is the Coastal Carolina transfer,
right,
the senior. He had 26 points against Utah, 26 points against Creighton. His turnovers have been reeled in big time coming off the bench. His scoring has increased big time coming off the bench. I asked Rudy the other night over at the Marriott Center, I go, what do you like about coming off the bench? He's like, you know what? I don't really care whether I come off the bench or what. We've noted that he's playing starter minutes. So he says, I don't know, maybe I get into the flow a little bit more when I can watch and see what's happening. And then we asked Mark Pope, and Mark said, basically mirrored that. And he said, listen, some guys, when they can sit for just a minute, take in what's going on, see what where the ability to attack is, and then come in a little more calm, then all the hype that goes with the start of the game and the introductions and the videos and all that kind of stuff.
Which is cool.
Right. It's all really cool.
Yeah.
But for some reason, Rudy coming off the bench has been phenomenal. And he's a game changer. He was a game changer in that Utah game.
26 points, 0 turnovers for a guy who's turned it over more than anyone on the team. And which is why he kind of went to the bench. You have a point guard with 42 assists and 45 turnovers. Whereas the freshman,
right,
Dallin Hall's got 41 assists, 21 turnovers. That's a plus 24. Right. That's the difference between Dallin and Rudy is 24 turnovers. But when the lights were bright and the youths were in town, 26 points, no turnovers for Rudy. We're excited to see him the rest of the week.
He played great in big games. And here's what I love about Dallin Hall. All those things we just talked about, the lights going on, the introductions, the videos, the fireworks, doesn't seem to change the way he approaches it. Like, he's unbelievably steady. At this point in his career, he's not quite as aggressive offensively as Rudy is. Or I do think there's going to come a point in his career when he is, but he's taking care of the ball. That little switch that Mark has made, I think, has made a big difference. And I think Foose looked healthier in the game against Utah as well, and that helps as well. But
think about what Mark Pope's building when you forecast 2 years from now, and you have Dallin Hall as a veteran point guard, and you've got Richie Saunders,
who's been playing really
great,
well,
and you have Tanner Toulson. You've got Foose as a senior, and you throw in Colin Chandler
coming back.
And now that's a group that can go win some games.
You know who is like,
and then add a bunch of other guys.
Atiki Aliatiki has surprised me. Yeah. The progress he has made. He was so raw last year. I knew he was a freakish athlete, but I didn't know if he could play. Now I'm going, no, the next 2 years, he's going to be really good.
Yeah, and you can see him, like in tonight's broadcast or on Thursday, watch him closely because you can see him figuring things out. Yep. And then sometimes he'll do some things like, I didn't know that was a rule. You can't slam the ball down and not get a technical. I had no idea. We do that all the time back in where I'm from. But you can see him learning, and you can see the look in his eyes of like, oh, that's how that works.
Yeah, and as he learns, like, he's a little bit quicker to help on defense. He understands, oh, this is where I step over and do this. So he's affecting more shots. He's blocking more shots. He's having a huge impact on defense. He's like, oh, when I catch the ball this deep, this is when I take a drop step and just go right to the glass and put it on the glass. His confidence grows every game. His physical skills are off the chart. His physical skills, Dave, are as good as anybody in the Big 12.
Yeah.
Like, he's a 6'10" dude that can jump and almost touch the top of the backboard, and it has great hand-eye coordination, bouncy, can run up and down the floor. He just hasn't played a lot of basketball.
Right.
So the future for that, you mentioned all the people you just mentioned, and then you add that guy who just keeps getting better every single game.
And then 2 years of other guys.
Right. It's going to be.
There's a light at the end of the tunnel.
We all knew this was going to be what we would call a reloading year, and kind of have some ups and downs. But what I'm seeing is promising.
Weber State is at the Marriott Center Thursday night at 9 Eastern, 7 Mountain on BYU TV. Game day coverage starts an hour earlier. That game just got a lot more interesting after last night when Weber State went into Logan and put the first loss of the season on Utah State, 75-72.
Yeah.
The Aggies couldn't shoot. Imagine a team all of a sudden can't shoot.
Yeah,
we know that story.
We've seen that. But, hey, Weber's a well-coached, talented basketball team. That's going to be a fun game.
You know, it's what's weird in that one. In that rivalry, it's the 48th meeting, I think, or 49th. BYU's 22-0 at home.
I know.
Against Weber State.
Well, and we have a lot of respect for that program, and the fact that they just went up and beat Logan, or won in Logan, just makes that Thursday game a little bit better.
Yeah.
Has a little more to it. But you know what? It's all a big, nothing if BYU doesn't take care of business tonight.
Right. Take care of Lindenwood and then Weber State, and we'll be on the call for both of those on BYU TV. Women's hoops last night got beat by Portland at Portland, 67-45. A tough start. The WCC not doing any favors to the women at Gonzaga and at Portland, the first two conference games out of the gate. BYU lost both of them. During the defeat, Lauren Gustin saw her streak of double-doubles come to an end at 11. She can start a new streak on Wednesday. We thought if she could have got through last night, she would have cruised to the record.
Oh, yeah.
Which was 17.
It's interesting. The very first two league games are against probably the two most talented teams in the league outside of BYU.
And she did it against the Zags, but did not do it against the Pilots.
Yep.
Monmouth tomorrow. That's Wednesday, 3 Eastern, 1 Mountain on the BYU TV app. You'll be working with Spencer on that one?
Yep.
All right.
So, hey, next week on the Wise Guys, don't forget, right, Utah Jazz CEO Danny H. Like as you mentioned, Dave, it's going to be a great month of December when we look back on the guests that we've had on this show.
And what a year we've had. You go back to May, and all the big names come to the Wise Guys.
Yep.
They've got a tie to BYU. They come to this show, and we have big names coming in the year ahead. Where some of these guys are playing in the NFL, so we're just waiting for the offseason.
That's right. We'll get them.
And they'll be here. Big 12 bowl games this week. On Thursday, Baylor is in the Armed Forces Bowl against Air Force, and Louisiana is at Houston in the Independence Bowl. Houston gave up 77 points to SMU just a few weeks ago, and BYU gave up 23 to SMU.
That's a great.
last week.
That's a great. 77-66 was that.
That's totally nuts.
That actually scared me a little bit. So, hey, should we cover Cougs in the NFL this
do
week,
it.
Dave? Okay. Jags at Jets. Zach Wilson's going to start again this last week. 18 of 35, a touchdown, 317 yards, two touchdowns against the Lions, not just one.
He didn't lose that game. There was a lot going on. I thought he played good.
Bad clock management, no question.
And the Jets fans just may be beyond repair.
They make the Eagles
they
fans
may just
seem
be
reasonable.
out there.
They make Eagles fans seem reasonable.
But I hope Zach can come back and have another good game.
Yep.
Saturday, Taysom Hill, who threw a 68-yard touchdown pass against the Falcons. He and Danny Sorensen take on the Browns. Saints at the Browns. Again, whenever Taysom has the ball, something exciting happens. Get him the ball more often.
Yeah,
I'm not a football genius, but as I see that, I'm thinking,
every time he touches it, something good happens, right?
Get the ball to Taysom.
So, and the Lions with Jamal Williams are at the Panthers on Saturday with Brady Christensen.
Lions are on fire. I think they're going to make the playoffs.
Jamal's playing great. Big part of that.
Falcons, Tyler Algier coming off his first big rushing game, 17 carries, 139 yards and a touchdown against the Saints. Algier's going to go to Baltimore, take on the Ravens.
Always good defensively. And then the Commanders with Dax Milne are at the 49ers with our guy Fred Warner.
It's fun when guys go head to head.
Yep.
And then get together after the game. Monday night, that's the day after Christmas. Kyle Van Noy, Michael Davis, and the Chargers are at the Colts. Chargers now making a march to the postseason.
Making a late season charge here. We'll call them the Chargers making a charge. So, all right. This day in history, right?
Yeah, each week we do this because I think it just adds perspective to life and to how we got.
And we go way
here.
back. We go way back.
We're going to start with 1699.
This is important because this affects us next week, right? So in 1699, Russian Tsar Peter the Great, he ordered the Russians' New Year to be changed from September 1st to January 1st. So,
do you think they were just bugged that the bowl games weren't on September 1st?
Yep. It's like we gotta make this match up. But hey, that's affected us all.
It really has. Imagine if the other half of the world had New Year's on a different day, different month.
New Year's on September 1st seems weird.
Yeah, there's a lot.
This is all we've known.
There's a lot. There was a lot from 1699 that was weird. 1803, the French flag was lowered in New Orleans to mark the formal transfer of the Louisiana Purchase from France to the United States for $15 million.
I'm sure that was
We've got homes around here that people spent $15 million on.
I'm sure that was a lot of money back in those days. Hey, in 1922, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republic, the USSR, is formed with 14 republics.
That's like in history. That's like the formation of Darth Vader and his group.
The axis of evil.
Just the way it's all
but
played
some
out.
of those republics weren't so evil.
No, but some of them didn't have choice.
Right.
So in they went. 1946, It's a Wonderful Life debuts in New York City.
I just saw that going through the TV guide the other night, and I'm like, that film was in 46. That's such a good film.
Yeah.
1962, the Osmond Brothers debut on the Andy Williams Show.
How about that? That was their big thing. And then Marie and Donnie came along a little later.
It all started with Andy Williams.
1966, on this day, the NBA awards the Seattle Supersonics a franchise. So those Supersonics are now the Oklahoma City Thunder.
Right.
And maybe Seattle will get another team someday.
In 1974, Godfather 2 was released to much anticipation.
And it lived up to the billing.
That whole series lived up to the building.
1981, the Cleveland Browns. Of course, this would happen to the Browns. They set a record with 10 turnovers in a game, 9 fumbles. 9 fumbles. Now, after the 8th fumble, you come off the sideline. You still have another fumble ahead of you. What's going on?
I remember a time when the Browns, they were great back in the day, but there was a time when I was growing up when people were wearing bags over their heads in the game.
Yeah, that wasn't too long ago.
1985, Howard Cosell retires from ABC.
He was Monday Night Football. Frank Gifford was good. Dandy Don Meredith was good. They brought in some other guys.
Didn't matter. Howard Cosell was Monday Night Football. Yep.
He was what a voice. 1991. This affects all of us.
Yes.
Father of the Bride was released in the United States with Steve Martin, Martin Short, and Diane Keaton. That was a classic.
And the story
movie.
Still is true.
And it was a remake, but it was just so good. And then they had, I think, 2 and 3 or something. But when that one came out, I remember watching that. That was just a feel-good movie.
Yes, it was. So
birthdays on December 20th.
1868, Harvey Firestone of the Firestone Tire Company is born in 1868 on December 20th.
1946, Dick Wolf, producer of Miami Vice, Law & Order, and about 9 current shows on television. He just sits down and makes a fortune every week. But Miami Vice back in the day,
oh yeah,
that was the trendsetter. That's where the music and styles
they
came from.
They made a movie of it too. So 1981, Roy Williams, great receiver, who is the uncle of BYU receiver Keanu Hill.
Happy birthday,
That's why we
Roy.
included him in this.
Jonah Hill, actor, born 1983 from Moneyball.
Yeah.
What a role he played in that one.
And tomorrow's Libby Fowler Lloyd's birthday. Libby Lloyd's birthday.
Libby Lloyd.
My baby girl. She's tomorrow, the 21st. Happy birthday to Lib.
Deaths on December 20th, 1812.
Sacagawea, the Shoshone interpreter for the Lewis and Clark expedition, died in 1812.
You know, that Night of the Museum movie series was also pretty good.
Yeah. Sacagawea was in that, right?
Yeah. 1971, Roy Disney died on this day.
And in 1996, Carl Sagan.
He was the man about the stars.
Yep, absolutely.
Caleb Chapman's ready to perform Rise and Shout for us tonight, which we think is appropriate to send into the holiday week. and BYU looking for a couple more wins on the basketball court, coming off that football win at the New Mexico Bowl. DJ, you got Caleb ready? All right.
It was a great week to be a Cougar.
Here's a rise and shout. There we go. The great Caleb Chapman. I was at his Christmas show with the Crescent Super Band at the Syrah Theater in Orem last night. They are again tonight, Tuesday, and again tomorrow night, Wednesday. Outstanding show. Go check it out if you can. Next week, Danny Ainge and Tim Lacombe will be with us as we wrap up the year with a bang. This is our final show before Christmas. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, and we'll see you on BYU TV in just a minute.
Yeah, and then we'll see you Thursday night.
I'll see you tomorrow.
Yeah, you and I, we'll see each other all week.
We'll see a bunch.
It'll be fun. The podcast will be up tomorrow. Tell your friends all about it. Spread the word, and we will see you next week again. Merry Christmas, and thanks for making the Wise Guys part of your life.